And the whole theory about the thing is that, okay, when you decide that you do want to get pregnant, you just go to your doctor and they can remove it. And so the theory is that these little plastic arms are supposed to fold down and come right up. So they have to remain flexible because, I mean, they spread out like this to keep it from falling out.
Yeah.
But when you pull it, they're supposed to,
retract.
Just retract.
Are they not doing that?
No. So what's happening is that the plastic arms are becoming rigid over time and breaking.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens is then these arms break and they can get stuck. They can perforate the uterus. They can end up where they can't remove them and they're still in there.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. Another week, another show.
We're up to show number 19 now. So
19.
Next week will be the big 2-0.
That's crazy, flying through them. 19 weeks of shows. Doesn't feel like that long, but...
Sometimes it feels like longer. I don't know. I'm like, only 19?
I feel like we've grown. I feel like the show has really developed over the last 19 weeks.
Oh, yeah. Some changes, some improvements, some modifications.
I'm always impressed, too, especially like very early on. We got around like 5 to 6K views on YouTube. And whenever I tell my friends, I mean, compared to like, because whenever people think of podcasts, they think of like Joe Rogan, millions and millions, right? Well, that's just so absurd. But especially for starting out, I mean, we started pretty strong and we've been staying pretty consistent. And I'd like to think it's because of the unique topic and nature of the show.
And the great personalities, of course.
Fantastic personalities. Top tier.
Actually, when we were starting to do this, I was looking at some stats on podcasts. And I don't remember what the numbers are, but there's like so many out there. But then the vast majority of them have like one episode. I mean, they give up after one,
really?
Or like last for a very short period of time. So I figure we'll certainly make it to 20. That's next week.
Yeah, well,
we're doing pretty good.
When I thought of that too, is because there was like this whole phase where when podcasts first started getting big, Joe Rogan first started like really blowing up. Everyone wanted to start a podcast. But I think that people started it and they just wanted to start it with their friends and they would just like have conversations and they just thought that was kind of like enough content there. I was just joking around with some friends, which it's good. It's fun. There's like that Bad Friends podcast. That's kind of what they do. But it's hard to maintain, and it's hard to always have topics, and it's hard to maintain interest too because you don't have that consistent kind of theme and like I said, topics to keep people coming back and what they expect in the future shows.
I mean, unless it's your friends and you just want to hear what's up with your friends.
True. But then that's how you get 4 or 5 viewers. I mean, maybe other people have more friends, but
but not us.
No, unless Bruno and Bauer can throw on a headset, I think we're pretty limited.
Oh, well, it's been fun. I'm enjoying it.
So how was your last week? How's the last 7 days been?
Good. Actually, relatively quiet, although we went to a concert last night, so that was kind of fun. We went to see Chicago in concert.
Is that newer people, older people? Would my generation know it?
Well, I thought not. In fact, as we were going into the concert venue, Peter and I looked around. We were like, we might be the youngest people here. But not.
Well, I guess that answers my question.
But then actually we got in there. There were some other people. So Chicago, and I don't know, it's like the famous songs are like Saturday in the Park.
Yeah. No, I love that one.
Are you serious? Are you making fun of me? All right, damn it, whatever. Well, anyway, you'll have to. I'll play you some songs. You probably would recognize some of them, but they were very popular, like in the '70s, and so it was the very first concert that I ever went to in my life, and I think I was like maybe 13 or something, and my mother took me, and I thought it was like super cool that I was at a concert, and it was at this place in Maryland called Merriweather Post Pavilion. So it was a big outdoor venue, and people would come and they would picnic and sit out on the lawn and everything. Anyway, it was very, very exciting and very memorable experience for me, and it's always on my mind because I don't. Not always on my mind, but when you have like security questions on various accounts, oftentimes one of them is, what was your first concert? So I guess people remember what their first concert was.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess you kind of gave away your security question. Oh,
Well, there's
geez.
usually three, so you'll have to be able to. Anybody who wants to use that against me, anybody who wants to hack me and use that, will have to know two of the others too. So
That's
we'll
fair.
go into that, yeah. But anyway, so that was really exciting. That it's very memorable for me. And then the other memorable thing about Chicago concerts is that in 2020. They were playing in Las Vegas, and I was like, I haven't seen Chicago in 40, 30 years. I don't know. And it was like, so I convinced Peter that we wanted to fly to Vegas just to see Chicago in concert, got great seats, got it all scheduled and everything. And it was around like March 16th. Yeah. And so, and everything was just heating up, and are we going to get locked down? No, that's impossible. That could never happen. And then some things were getting canceled, but other things weren't. And we kept looking and looking. We're like, well, it's not canceled. It's not canceled. The flights are still going. And then we were like, well, shit, if it's not canceled, we're going to go. I mean, we have these great tickets. So we flew to Vegas. And of course, I posted on Facebook, and people are like, what the heck are you doing? Why are you traveling? You're crazy.
Scum of the earth. How could you?
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway. And it was odd. In fact, we stayed at the Bellagio, and I remember we had like dinner before we went to the concert, and it was the quietest I've ever seen Las Vegas. And I don't remember the day of the week. It was probably not a Friday or Saturday. Well, it might have been, though, because if Peter was off work, maybe it was a weekend night. Anyway, I mean, it was just really strange because it was not packed, and people were kind of a little hesitant. Everybody just kind of wondering what was going to happen. But the concert was great, and we flew back the next day, and like literally within days, everything was just done down, shut.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was kind of, I guess, our last hurrah before the lockdown.
Yeah.
So Chicago holds a place in my heart for a variety of reasons.
It's
security questions, first concert, last pre-lockdown concert.
pretty deep meaning across the board there.
Yeah.
I always think it's interesting too with a lot of these older bands, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like whenever I hear the name, I always think to myself, like, how is that a name? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, I went to a concert. Oh, a band, Chicago and concert. What does that even mean? Chicago and concert?
No, Chicago in concert.
Chicago. So the band's name is Chicago in concert.
No, the band's name is just Chicago.
Oh.
You definitely don't know them, I guess.
Well, the way you said it was like, oh, I went to a concert. Oh, what concert? Chicago in concert.
Okay, I don't know if I said that. Anyway, I went to Chicago to see Chicago.
Yeah. And what kind of music is it?
Well, so it's like 70s. Although they were very popular in the 80s as well, and then they've continued. I don't even know how many albums they've had. I mean, ridiculous number.
How old are they? I mean, I feel like some of these bands, how do they?
They said actually, I think they said they've been together for 54 years.
So they rolled them out on stage.
All right. Well, there were three members who were founding members, and then four who've been there for a really, really long time. So they're a little bit on the older side.
Slightly, yeah.
But, I can relate to that. And they still sounded amazing. And I'm always impressed with these bands, too, because these are bands that used to, sell out huge stadiums. And now they're playing at relatively smaller venues. I mean, it's still pretty big. I mean, It was at the at TCC at the Music Hall. So, that smaller where they have, like, the operas and things like that. Anyway, and that appeared to be sold out. So, I mean, again, it's not as many people because I guess a lot of their fans are dying off.
I was about to say most of their fans aren't still here with us.
Although, I mean, look at like the Rolling Stones. I mean, they're selling out stadiums still.
Yeah, but that's a Rolling Stones. It's like comparing.
Well, they're also like 80 or so.
Yeah, I mean that's an age
I think
thing.
Mick Jagger is turning 80 now, or just turned 80.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, when you mentioned first concerts too, it makes me think of Alice Cooper.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, it was a crazy concert, and I remember he hung himself on stage. And it was like
a lot
insane.
of crazy stuff. Well, yeah. So, and that was a funny story too, because I wanted to take you to a concert, and you were, oh gosh, you were even younger than that. You were maybe like
11 or 12.
Were you that old even?
I mean, I had the bleach blonde, long hair.
Yeah, I actually have a picture of us at that concert in the living room. But it was, I wanted to take you to a concert, and I wanted to take you to a concert that I thought would not be boring, because I thought, well, if it's just somebody singing, that's not going to be that exciting for a younger boy.
I didn't like any like specific bands or artists back then.
Yeah.
I mean, both you and my dad had such different music tastes and a wide variety of them. Yeah. I mean, I'd go to school one day listening to It's Raining Men, and then the next day listen to Alice Cooper, another day Black Eyed Peas. I mean, it was a wide variety.
Well, that's probably true. But it was a really fun concert, and we were in the front row. I remember that. Yeah. And I had you in a Alice Cooper T-shirt. In fact, Alice Cooper's coming back to Tucson too in October. I just saw, so I will probably, and it wasn't my first concert, but I was a huge Alice Cooper fan, like starting probably in high school.
Yeah.
And I saw him in concert many places. And then I moved to Arizona where he lives. How cool is that?
Well, I don't know why I have this vivid memory too. Is because we were in the front, like you said, and next to us there was this person just going nuts, and it was a big person, and I was a tiny little boy, and I was like thinking I was gonna get trampled over or whatever. And that person like turns to me and says something like, "Oh, you having a good time?" Blah blah blah, and talks to us for a second, and I don't know if this is mean. Actually, we're just I'm not going to go into
I don't even remember this.
I think it was a she turns to us and she's like asking us how it was a good time or whatever, and I think I was like, but one of us like, was that a man or a woman? I don't remember because it was just I think it was a she, but she had like hair, just a very hairy woman, very on set, short hair. You like couldn't really tell. But it was just a wide variety, unique.
Well, it's dark and
crowd.
crazy. Who knows? But yeah, well, see, I mean, now if anybody's hacking us and looking for security questions, they now know both of our first concerts.
Very true. Well, I don't use that one because that's maybe a good one. I guess I do remember that very
Yeah, you do.
vividly.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it sounds like a good weekend, and that was in Tucson.
Well, actually, that was last night.
In Tucson.
Yeah, it was in Tucson. So we didn't have to fly to Vegas this time and risk life and limb and COVID.
It's always crazy to me, too, that there's so many people that come to Tucson for concerts.
Yeah, well, and I don't remember Chicago ever being here, which is why we flew our butts to Vegas pre-COVID to see them. So I'm kind of excited that they did come. And, and again, it's probably a sign also of, they are getting older, I guess a little bit less popular, so they're going to maybe some of the smaller venues now. So
Well, but that's the thing is that even for like modern artists, rappers, and bands and whatnot, a lot of people come to Tucson. I mean, Phoenix, of course, is a pretty big spot, but Tucson, I know like Lil Peep came here, Mac Miller came here. I mean, those are massive.
Rolling Stones did, and Garth
artists.
Brooks did, and we had to go to Vegas, we had to go to Phoenix for those.
Yeah, well, that's true, but they would probably sell out here. Tucson's a pretty big retirement home city.
They'd sell out, but I think our venues aren't big enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Anyway, so how was your week? What's happening with you?
Weekend's good. We got a Nintendo Switch, which is like a little mini console, and it's very easy to like bring around to places, compared to the big Xbox or PlayStation, and they have all the classics, Mario Kart. It's a good casual, just kind of gaming experience. Got into Pokemon. I haven't played Pokemon in like 10, 15 years or something like that.
Wow.
It's still kind of obviously it's a little bit of a childish game, but it's very nostalgic, and I've been playing the heck out of that. It's been a lot of fun. It's good just like relax or like kind of party game. You're drinking a little bit, and you don't want to just sit there and listen to music the whole time or watch TV, so you just throw up some Mario Kart. Everyone's down with Mario Kart. Everyone knows how to play it. It's a universal thing.
So do you play with other people in the same room, or is this one of these where you play online with people?
Well, so you can play online, I suppose, but a lot of time it's like there's bots, so like computers, NPCs that just go around. But me and Christina, we got two controllers, so we go against each other, and it's a good little competition. She gets a little frustrated. I'm a natural at-heart gamer. It's in my blood.
She doesn't have quite the experience you
No,
have.
not at all. And she gets upset because I beat her every single time. But I just, I got to break it down to her. Like, sorry, I have 25 years of experience. You're catching up. So
Well, I have confidence in her. She will catch up.
we'll see.
We'll see.
But overall, it was a good weekend. Drive down was solid. I look forward to the drive down. There was a massive dust storm coming down.
Oh, actually, yeah, I knew you were on the way, and it started getting really kind of crazy here, and then it just kind of puttered out.
Yeah, it was insane because like you could see it out in the front, and you could tell it was kind of close because you can see it moving. And as soon as you like start going to the dust storm, visibility starts getting less and less, and there's a bridge a little bit in front, and it just went completely out of view. I couldn't see anything except for the taillights right in front of me, but it was only for like 2 minutes, and then you got through it, and then it went into a huge rainstorm for like 2 minutes, and then everything cleared up, and it was fine. Clear skies.
Maybe it's coming this way. I don't know.
Maybe. But let's get into it. We can start with updates on cases.
Updates on cases. Okay. So we talked, actually we talked a lot of, on a lot of these episodes about the talc and what's happening now. And I think we talked the last time that the second bankruptcy had been dismissed. They still said, no, we're not buying this whole thing. You're not financially in distress, blah, 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 blah.
And a quick overview, because I know sometimes sometimes I'll get a little lost because we talk about so many different medications and so many different cases. Talc is the talc powder a lot of people were using on their chest and inhaling it, and it was causing a variety of different issues.
Yeah, well, actually, the classic one really is women who used it in their genital area were getting ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
But men would use it on their chests and could inhale it and actually could come down with mesothelioma and other lung issues. So yeah, and this is the Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, baby powder, talcum powder, shower to shower, the products. They are no longer selling them. And they are still arguing and screaming and yelling and crying that their products are perfectly safe and that they do not cause cancer. But their juries have disagreed with them, and there have been multiple really significant multi-million-dollar verdicts. And so as a result, they attempted to file bankruptcy in a very deceptive deceptive way by basically creating a subsidiary called LTL and giving that subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson all of the obligations and all of the lawsuits, basically, all of the liability for those products. And the first time the judge said, no, we don't, it's not okay. It's called the Texas two-step. That's not what the bankruptcy code is for. Bankruptcy is for companies that are truly in financial distress. You don't get to do it. So then they filed again, like immediately within
3 hours later.
Yeah, within hours. And they said, oh, okay, well, now we're putting more money in. And it was a much higher number. I think it was 8.9 million, or billion.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's a lot more money, but again, it wasn't sufficient to cover the liabilities. It's why they were doing it, and it's not. They still aren't in financial distress.
Yeah.
So that got kicked out again, and part of what the plaintiffs had asked was ask the judge to prohibit them from refiling within 6 months, and that decision just came out. They said no, we're not going to prohibit them from refiling. So again, they probably will refile. However, in all likelihood, this is not something that they're going to get up, like, say, to the Supreme Court, because it's just not great facts.
Yeah.
So while they probably will appeal, or they can, if I'm saying appeal, they can file another bankruptcy. We don't think that's going to be successful. And so what's happening right now are that all of these cases, there's just tons, hundreds, thousands of cases out there, and many of them were in the process of getting worked up for trial, and that was all put on hold for years while this is going on. And now all those cases are reactivated, discovery's happening, trials are going to start moving forward, really gearing up to see a lot more trials happening. So...
And so is that the update there? Is that things are kind of kicking back up?
Yeah, they're definitely kicking back up. And in fact, a lot of attorneys, I have some cases in association with another law firm, and then there are also some of the plaintiffs' lawyers are trying to bring in other attorneys who are willing to jump in and try some of these cases.
Yeah.
And since I do have some time on my hands now, I am throwing my hat in the ring for that. So hopefully I will be, they need people who can hop on a plane and go where they're needed and start trying some of these cases. So hopefully that will be something we'll be updating about.
Be flexible in the moment. And it's good that cases are picking back up, because I know you mentioned as well is that one of the tactics for this bankruptcy kind of appeal, the Texas two-step, was to delay it. And I mean,
yeah, it's a big delay. Well, and it's worked. I mean, for years these cases have been sitting there.
Yeah.
And people, again, these are terminal illnesses. People have died during the pendency of this. I mean, one of the cases that I'm involved in, he passed away. It's probably been a couple of years now, but it was after his case was filed and it was moving along, and now it's just been sitting there. And so, his deposition was taken so that it can be played at court, because he will not be present, obviously, and that's happened in a lot of these cases. I mean, people, these are terminal cancers, and so when you do a 2-3 year delay, the likelihood of the person being able to be present at trial is pretty minimal.
And doesn't that hurt Johnson & Johnson? Because, I mean, obviously if someone has a disease or even terminally ill disease, it's not as serious as being dead, right? And so I would assume with there being a higher body count attached to their medication or product or whatever it is, and there being direct connections to that, wouldn't that look even worse for them?
Well, I don't know how much worse things could
Sure,
things could look for them, but I mean, and especially knowing that things have been dragged out, but it is very juries want to see the person, and they, it's different giving money to the family who lost a person. I mean, that's very valid, but having the person actually talk about it, how it affected them and what their life has been like, is just incredibly powerful. And so that is one of the reasons why we take depositions, to be able to preserve their testimony so that the jury does get to hear from that person. And quite frankly, I think that can be very bad for Johnson & Johnson, or even worse, where I mean, they're hearing somebody kind of speaking from the grave, right? And you see this person and that now they're gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's bad for them, but they're doing everything they can to try to get out of this or minimize their exposure. And that also goes to the fact that if this was resolved through bankruptcy, there aren't trials. It's basically a bankruptcy claim. You don't have testimony. You don't have juries. You don't have juries looking at people testifying who are no longer with us. So yeah, it would be great if this whole two-step thing would work for them, but I don't think it's going to.
That makes sense. I didn't even think about that angle of it. With the Texas two-step is that there is no jury. There's not a trial or anything like that.
Right.
And are these depositions, when they're played for the jury, is it video as well?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I always imagined. I mean, I guess it's kind of like compared to a lot of the law shows or like the OJ case, it's when they play things at court, it's like a tape recorder. They play it and then everyone's just kind of like sitting there taking it and listening it.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine having the visual, and especially with some of these diseases where you can see a lot of the effects it's having on the victim, makes a big impact as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. There are video depositions.
So that's a case we're handling. Speaking of cases that we're handling, what else is on the docket?
So, well, the topic for today are the Paragard IUD cases. And so the IUD is, of course, a form of birth control, and it's actually a device that is placed in the uterus. And I actually brought a photo because I wasn't sure if you would know what this was or not.
I've heard of IUD. I never really understood what it is, but I've also heard that it's something that you can like put into your arm.
So actually, that is more of the hormonal. Okay, so that's kind of like a birth control pill that you can't forget to take. So that's the where they're implanting it under your skin and it's slowly releasing the hormones.
That's what I've heard. I thought it was just different versions of IUD, but they're completely different.
No, so an IUD actually, because what it stands for is intrauterine device. So if it's in your arm, it's not.
It's not intrauterine.
It's not in your uterus, yeah. So IUD means intrauterine device, and there have been various ones over the years, but basically it's a device that's placed into the uterus that can be removed. So it can go for multiple years. Some of them have actually, there are versions that had hormones also that were released, and those usually you could keep in for about 5 years. This one has copper coils, and it can be left in place for like 10 years. So so it's a good long time. And basically the way that it works is that it's inserted and then these arms kind of pop out so that it doesn't fall out. And so there's these copper coils, and the copper coils, they release small amounts of copper particles. And this getting released into you look so ill.
Well, I mean, it's just, I think anything in your body, right, is it's a lot, right? And a lot, especially a lot of the topics we talk about with the hernia mesh.
Yes, you're wincing.
Yeah, these different materials. But when you mention copper coils, like the uterine IUD aside, copper being in your body, I mean, that's something that it makes me wince because it's just like metals.
I mean, it does not sound.
And the picture, it's just straight out. I mean, Fernie will throw it up. It's not something that's like covered. at all?
Well, no. The copper needs to be out because that's what's happening is it's causing this reaction in the uterus because there's this foreign object in there,
Yeah.
and so it's like a toxic inflammatory response, and it makes the uterus hostile to an egg being implanted.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like meant to irritate it so it will
Prevent pregnancy, yes. So it basically prevents the sperm from reaching and fertilizing
Yeah.
the egg, and so it sounds like an awful idea. I never thought this sounded like a good
does.
thing.
That-
Any of them didn't.
It
sound
just
good.
sounds like you're kind of like making things bad so it doesn't get worse. Worse being getting pregnant if that's not what you want.
Yeah, but I mean, there are many ways that you can avoid getting pregnant, and of course, there's like condoms, there's diaphragms, things like that
Yeah.
basically are like a physical barrier that you remove, right?
And so this is putting metals into your body that your body doesn't like, irritates it enough to just say, you know what, I don't want anything else in here.
And the baby's not going to want to be there either. Like, oh no, this is not a good place. We are
Copper,
not.
get me out of here.
We're not doing this. Yeah. So anyway, but obviously you and I don't think this is a great idea at all. But it has been very successful in preventing pregnancies and a long-term, again, not something that you can forget to do.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have used this over the years. You can leave it in for up to 10 years. And the whole theory about the thing is that, okay, when you decide that you do want to get pregnant, you just go to your doctor and they can remove it. And so the theory is that these little plastic arms are supposed to fold down and come right up. So they have to remain flexible because, I mean, they spread out like this to keep it from falling out.
Yeah.
But when you pull it, they're supposed to, just
retract.
just
almost.
retract
Are they
up.
not doing that?
No. So what's happening is that the plastic arms are becoming rigid over time and breaking.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens is then these arms break and they can get stuck. They can perforate the uterus. They can end up where they can't remove them and they're still in there. They can migrate through the body.
Jeez.
So it's and so what happens if it breaks either before or after or during the removal process, people can end up with infections. They can end up, organ perforations where they have to have surgeries, sometimes hysterectomies. So people who did this temporarily and were hoping to then be able to have babies when it was removed, I mean, they're in there getting it removed. Many times that's the reason.
Yeah.
And then they can actually, their fertility can be affected.
Wow.
This is a case that's been going on actually for quite a while. It's been a multi-district litigation. There's over 1,700 cases that have been filed, but over 3,000 complaints to the FDA about this thing.
Wow.
And again, most people don't complain to the FDA. So whenever you see that there's complaints, and it can be physicians or patients, and again, most physicians don't take the time to do that either. So that there are many, many more issues than
Those
that.
are probably like the really, really bad ones.
Yeah. I mean, it's there are multiples of times of those. So, and the first trial is coming up. That's going to be in March of next year, March of 2024. So this case is moving along. It is something that we are still taking cases, and I can actually probably just go through. Basically, to have a valid case, you basically have to have the Paragard IUD, and had to have a fracture of the IUD either before or during the removal, and then some damages, and the damages could be perforation of uterus, cervical perforation, migration. Pieces left inside causing inflammation or allergic reaction, infertility, infection, chronic pain. So those cases, again, they are still going on, and we're happy to talk to anybody if they feel like they might have a...
And I mean, already with like the copper being out is something that I think is just, it's a crazy idea. But with the... I don't even know what to call them. Like the
arms?
Oh, the arms. Yeah, the arms. So they're plastic.
They're plastic.
They're plastic. So and when they break or they perforate, like you said, is it because when I imagine it's like when I break a plastic coat hanger, right? And there's kind of shards fly everywhere.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's plastic that's supposed to stay soft and flexible and movable, but when it gets hard and it's stiff like that, and then it breaks, it can shatter. That's what we're saying. So there's very sharp pieces and potentially multiple pieces.
That's awful.
And then it's stuck up in there.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be this little minor, easy procedure at the office. They pull on the string, it slides right out, and
then they pull, and it's just chaos, havoc.
Yeah, sometimes.
That's awful. That's terrible. And I mean, I think especially with stuff like this where There's certain, like with the eyeballs, when we had the eye drops,
yeah.
there's certain body parts that when you have problems there, it's just like, God, that's a tough one. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
You break a finger, you mess up your hand. It's like, oh, that sucks. But there's certain areas where it's like this is a vulnerable spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is one of them. Yeah. I mean, and we've been involved in IUD cases in the past, and we were involved in like the Marina litigation. I mean, and there are problems with a variety of these things. And in those, the cases would actually the IUD would actually perforate the uterus and it'd be floating around in the abdominal cavity. There were cases where they ended up like in people's hearts. Jeez. I mean, now you just have and that was one that was had hormones too that were being released and this thing's. Well, first of all, it's obviously not doing its job when it's not even in your uterus anymore.
It's in your fucking heart. Yeah, something might be wrong here, guys.
Well, they would like find these on X-rays. They saw it X-rays, and it was just like, oh my God, that's crazy.
How does it even get that high up there without? I mean, just
well, it's just floating around in your body then.
But that's the thing is like when I imagine the human body, it's not like there's that much extra room hanging around that you can just float around and go through as you please without causing mayhem. Like I always imagine organs being pretty compact, everything's together, everything's where it needs to be. There's not too much extra space. But the fact that something like that can break off and just end up on the other side of the body, that's insane.
Although, I mean, but things move around more than you would think, and that's one of the issues that resulted in all the problems with the transvaginal mesh because if you think about it in that area, I mean, you're eating, you get bloated. I mean, there's a lot of like movement, and so that's why these things when they tightened up, I mean, the scar, there was a lot of movement. I mean, sex, there's all kinds of things that are happening down there that can move things around. And so these things can potentially migrate around.
And it's good that that's coming out because, I mean, I think that's something that's terrifying where even like the hernia mesh where that there are possible issues, and as scary as it is that you might have these issues, if you're not, it's good to find out about it and know about it so you might be able to take some type of preventative actions or at least be aware of it compared to just kind of, being oblivious, coming in and wanting to get this removed, or with the hernia mesh going to get hernia surgery and just doing whatever you got to do, and then obviously things go bad.
Yeah. Well, and again, with any product that you're thinking about having implanted into your body, you want to do as much research as you can about what problems people have had, if there are issues. And again, a lot of times these things aren't recalled for many, many years or ever, and they still continue to be sold. But, you want to find out if people have had problems, what kind of complaints there have been to the FDA, if there are pending lawsuits, so that you can make an informed decision about, if you want to use that product, maybe a similar product, or maybe a different form of birth control in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was, I'm sure maybe there's versions of it, but some mainstream birth control for men. I feel like this is always a conversation that comes up eventually. Is like, why is it the woman's responsibility to take birth control? And then like, well, would men do it if they had the option? And I think, why not, Well,
I think it probably depends on what they've been talking about having a male pill, and I thought I heard something recently about that. But again, so that's going to be, are men going to be willing to take something that's, completely affecting their hormones, potentially? I mean, all of the things that you guys have expected women to do for all of these years, are you guys willing to do it?
And a lot of men take steroids and various other...
Which can be birth control as well, can it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
unintended. It can
mess
mess
up your hormones a lot more, if I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so maybe if they were saying, well, they'll also look really good.
Oh,
if you add that, they'll probably sign up right and left.
Sign me up for double dosage.
I look really great, and I can't get anybody pregnant.
Yeah. So with these cases, if you have this device, I'm assuming, or if you've ever had any issues, reach out to an attorney, obviously. But is there any, what do you do, right? You have this device installed. Do you go to the doctor and get it replaced right away? Is it something you need to go in and start getting x-rays to see if it's already broken up and you haven't realized it?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you're not going to, the problem doesn't happen when it's just sitting there. It happens upon removal.
Okay.
And so, and the doctor...
That's even scarier. You don't even know if it's going to be a big problem until that moment.
Right, right. But again, I mean, and of course, the only good cases are ones where you remove it within the 10 years. Sometimes people just forget about this. And so again, if you leave it in for 20 years and it breaks, then it's not going to be a strong case. But I personally would not, well, I wouldn't have wanted one to start with, but, it may be something, if you're planning on removing it, don't wait till the absolute long, end of the
11 months.
length of time, because obviously this plastic is degrading over time, and perhaps, and again, this isn't the case now, but perhaps they will come out with a warning that, okay, take it out after 5 years, and perhaps that would lessen the incidence of the breakage. I don't know.
And so are there warnings about it where if it's like, if you wait too long, if you go past the 10 years, then it could break?
Well, I think there's always warnings too that it could break, but
right. Okay.
and it could, but I mean the incidence at which it's breaking, that the likelihood of it, I mean that's over and above anything that has been warned about.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And you said this has been going on for a while. This is now a case that we're handling and we're accepting cases.
Oh, yeah. Well, we have been, and many firms have been for a few years now. But and of course, everything delayed by COVID, blah, 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 the story of our lives. But that the first trial is coming up, and so it should be in the news significantly more, and we'll see what happens.
And I think it's just so interesting, too, cases like this where this is pretty bad. This is like a pretty big thing. And I know... birth control, IUDs, everything along those lines, it's super common for women to date in this day and age.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like an everyday thing. And so for there to be issues of this magnitude with a specific kind and have it not be something that's discussed or like well known is pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, and when somebody's discussing this with their doctor, they're not going to. Well, I think doctors are becoming more aware, but oftentimes, for a good period of time, they're like, "Oh, this is just the lawyers being crazy, and blah blah blah. It's very safe, and the risks are small." But the risks are certainly more significant than the doctors are even aware of.
Yeah.
And it's just important that people really do. I mean, some of these things are just so common that it's just like, oh, no big deal. We're going to put this in. It's a quick in-office procedure, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I don't know how much detail they're going into about the risks, but this one, is certainly more significant than most people are aware of.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's the risks of it sound massive. I can't even imagine having something like that. And it's scarier too, where, a lot of these things with the hernia mesh, I mean, obviously things can get bad quickly, but, maybe you start having these signs, right? You start having discomfort, some poking pain, or, you get an x-ray and see that there's something coming out. But with something like this, where you really have no idea until you take it out, and it's happening before the 10 years and early on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's terrifying. And knowing of it and being like, okay, I want to get this removed, but holy shit, I'm terrified.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, people are going to be much more scared at this whole process than they used to be, thinking, no big deal, pull a string, everything's good. Now they're like, pull a string, is it all there? Are the pieces all there?
God, yeah.
They know.
I know. I can't even imagine in the office, too. Like you said, it's just an in-office procedure. So when that happens, I mean, I'm sure the doctor's not expecting anything like that. A lot of them haven't experienced that. And so they're just, holy shit, what's going on? What do I do? I'm assuming call the ambulance, like something... you guys got to figure out what's going on.
Well, I mean, and it may not be an ambulance scenario either. I mean, it comes out, there are pieces. It depends on exactly where it breaks and where it gets stuck.
They bring it out and there's just one whole half
piece
missing.
Well,
it's
then they know it's in there. And then the
Christ.
question is, where is it? And perhaps they're going to have to do an x-ray and
how many pieces it is. Yeah. God.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and then they would be sent to determine if surgery would be necessary to take it out, and where it is, if it's going to cause long-term problems or not.
Yeah. So we'll put in information about that specific IUD. So if you do have one, definitely make sure it's not that one. And if it is, probably recommend getting that taken out sooner rather than later, because the risks are, even if you take it out before the 10 years, there's still a chance.
Right. And of course, we can't give medical advice or anything like that. I mean, Dr. Ben would recommend, however, he's...
Yeah, in my non-professional opinion, I couldn't imagine something like this.
But I would certainly talk to my doctor and say, hey, this is a concern that I have, and are you familiar with this? And so, because again, you might not, the doctor might have put it in 5 years ago, and he knows about it now, or he or she knows about it now, but they didn't at the time.
Yeah. So it's crazy something like this isn't in the news. But speaking of cases in the news,
speaking of cases, there always are.
There always are
cases in the news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, this was like breaking big news that just came out yesterday because of the number. And this involves a bunk bed manufacturer who was hit with a $787 million verdict over the death of a toddler.
Wow.
Yeah, but there's a lot of factors that go into this.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy, horrifying situation, and it involves these bunk beds. And the actual death happened in 2018, and it was a 2-year-old. And I'll show you a picture of the bunk beds. Because basically what happened is it's the ladder, and where the ladder hooks up to the upper bunk, the spacing is just enough that a child can get trapped in there and asphyxiate, which is what happens. So this is kind of the
It's getting where I'm
so up in here.
Yeah.
So there's the steps, and then because it's hooked in here, there's it's a small space.
But so between there's like this wooden bar. And maybe Fern can throw a circle.
Yeah, well, I sent these to him here, so he can put these up. So these are actually the steps of the ladder.
Yeah.
But the way that it
So does his feet fall through, and then he's kind of squished between the bed and that
right,
frame?
He falls through in here, and then he's trapped and is
God. I mean, that's awful. But what I imagined when you mentioned bunk bed was, you know, Step Brothers, the Step Brothers theme where they make the homemade bunk bed.
Oh, I love that movie, but I can't remember the.
So they make the homemade bunk bed, and because they move in together, and they just get a bunch of wooden planks, and they make it, and then Will Ferrell's on the bottom, and the other guy's on top, and the bunk bed breaks, and it slams on top of him, and he's just trapped, and he's like screaming for help, and then the other guy runs to the parent, is like, "Oh God, something happened." But I mean, that's like the gruesome. I was thinking that like something like that where it breaks and collapse on it. I mean, that's still terrible, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a horrible design defect. And so what happened is the parents filed a lawsuit, and we had talked a little bit in the context of the eye drops about how you could sue various people in that chain of commerce.
Yeah.
And so they sued the seller, and ultimately back to the manufacturer. The seller was Wayfair. And then they also sued a couple of the manufacturers involved, Angel Line and Longwood. Those three actually settled the case. But the ultimate manufacturer of this product is a Vietnamese company and called Moash Enterprises. And so the interesting thing about this case is that, I mean, it's a huge, crazy verdict, but the likelihood of them getting, well, how we got to that is an issue. And then secondly, whether they'll ever collect on any of that. So it's this Vietnamese company, and they kept trying to serve them, and it's relatively complicated. I've had this come up in cases over the years when you're trying to serve an international company, a company in another country. You have to go through. There's something called the Hague Convention, which it has provisions for suing these companies. But I've had this happen too. Actually, I had this happen in a case with some patio furniture. Anyway, they just ignored it and they didn't respond. And so, so when a company doesn't ever respond and file an answer and defend itself, then you can get what's called a default judgment. And so basically the court says, you know, if you don't come in and defend yourself, bam, you're guilty, you're liable.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's what happened. And so it was, and again, another term we talked about recently, bifurcated. So there's a default hearing where they say, all right, yes, they are responsible, because they didn't come in and say they weren't. And so everything you say in your complaint, yes, they are responsible. They're on the hook. Then they have a trial with a jury to determine the amount of the damages. And so this was that second part where they had a jury listen to the whole situation, hear about what happened to this child, the family, the brothers were in the room, watched him die. And so then they were tasked with coming up with the amount that they should award. And you don't have the company in there. You don't have somebody arguing about any of it, trying to decrease it. So basically, you only hear from the one side. And I'm not saying that that it's unreasonable. I'm just saying that the reason, you know, that, I mean, there was nobody fighting it.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, with cases in general, someone tries to push their side of the case as much as they can, right? They make things say, the prosecution will put out the facts, and it's a terrible situation, but then the defense tries to downplay it as much as they can, and then the jury usually finds something a little bit in the middle. But when you don't have the defense trying to, downplay it as much as possible and, put the blame in different areas.
Exactly. Try to blame the parents, try to blame this and that, say that the thing was not used as intended or something. There's a gazillion things that they could try to say, but none of that, and when you don't show up, that's what happens. You don't get to tell your side of the story. And so the jury awarded, so it's $787 million, and that was broken down into $175 million in compensatory damages for the estate's survival claim. And that's a claim for what the suffering that the child went through until he died, and then $90 million for the wrongful death. So that's for, how the family is affected and all of that. And then $522 million in punitive damages.
Jesus.
Yeah. And of course, punitive damages, again, those are not so much related to the value of the injuries as to punishing, hence the term punitive, but punishing the company for wrongdoing. And so this company had not complied with United States safety standards, and they had apparently been aware of issues and continued to sell these beds. So the jury wanted to really slam them and punish them.
Well, how does it even hit the market if they're not going by the regulation in the country? I mean, they're just bypassing.
Well, they're shipping it to the sellers. Nobody's, there's nobody who's like looking at specific things and trying to determine that. I mean, and so it gets here, and until there's problems and complaints, it's not knowledge. There's not common knowledge.
Had there been complaints before this, up until this point?
I'm not sure. They indicated that there were problems. I don't know if there were actually other deaths, but definitely they had not followed any of the standards that would have prevented that. Within the United States requirements.
Well, and so the amount was $787 million.
$787 million.
And I mean that's a lot of money. I mean, I know obviously this case is terrible, but there's been a lot of awful deaths from different products and drugs, but 787 for a singular death, that's quite a bit, isn't it?
It is. It's a huge amount, and so obviously the jury was very angry. And again, there was nobody on the other side to argue against it. But the other issue is that a lot of times these cases, and the other participants in this, the seller and all, did settle out. So normally, in this kind of situation, if they were negotiating, there was a good chance that there would have been a settlement. But then you get a verdict like this, and then the question is, how is it going to get paid? First of all, does this Vietnamese company have anywhere near that much money? And secondly, how are you going to get it from them in Vietnam? And again, there's attorneys who deal specifically with that international collections, and so we'll see what happens. But my guess is that it's going to be very difficult to collect anything, and the company probably isn't even worth that. And what might happen, I mean, presumably they will be banned from selling products in the United States. So I could see them wanting to settle in order to be able to do that. But I mean, what if they just disband and create some other
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, it's sad. I think that it was a good message that was sent, but I'm skeptical that the family is ever going to see any of that.
And that's what happened with like a lot of the vapes when the FDA started really, cracking down on that, and the different manufacturers, Juul, Puff, and all that. A lot of them, as soon as they started getting in trouble and they were getting banned, they would just break up and sell the exact same products, sometimes with the exact same logo, and just change the name right under it. And I mean, and then you got to go through the same steps again in pursuing them. But with cases like this, where it's in a different country, already they were ignoring the what's it called? The
safety standards.
The cease and desist, or where they.
The summons and the complaint.
Yeah.
So they didn't respond. Yeah.
And so what's stopping them from doing that exact same thing with this payment, where they just like, I didn't see this. I'm not gonna.
Oh well, they're not gonna. Yeah, I mean, and if they don't have assets in the United States, there's nothing to seize. Yeah. I mean, like I said, the likelihood that they're going to be able to collect anything from them is pretty low. But I mean, it's not my area of specialty, and like I said, it's some international collections. I'm sure they're going to do everything they can to try to get what they can from them. But I mean, of course, people getting all excited, oh, they're going to get that much money. That's not likely.
Yeah.
Not likely.
I mean, even if they were available, like you said, I doubt their company's even worth that much. I mean, that's a lot of money, and especially for
not Johnson & Johnson.
Exactly. For a company that's across seas, not pharmaceutical, they're making bunk beds, and I'm sure they're making good profit margins there, but $787 million, that's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, that's crazy a lot of money.
But the family did still get settlement funds from the other.
They did, and that's not the amount is not disclosed, but they still wanted to pursue this, and I think it's it's a good thing also because by getting this out in the news, and it was big news, it's like headline news, people are aware of this, and these bunk beds were recalled back in 2021. But again, if you don't know about it and you still have this bunk bed in your home, you need to get rid of it, or get rid of that ladder for sure. So again, it brings it back into the news so that people are aware of it, and if they see that picture and go, oh my gosh, that's something, because, as we've talked about ad nauseum at this point, just because there's a recall, people don't know, and they're still using these products. And then it gets sold in, resale places and all of that. And
it's, I don't really get to, I mean, I understand what you're saying with how exactly this happened, but I mean, that space must have been really big because I had a bunk bed back in the day, but even at the top, the ladder went up, and where the bed sat, there was wooden panels. Maybe there were some small spaces in between the panels, but nothing for even a toddler to fit through when there was no mattress, and especially if there's a mattress there's no way that there was any way to get stuck in between it or anything like that.
Well, and that's how they should be designed.
Yeah.
Again, because toddlers will wedge themselves into places, and they're not good at, So, I mean, there's, very strict design standards just for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's wild. And I mean, it makes sense that it's kind of getting headline news because of obviously how gruesome it is with a 2-year-old, and as well as the high settlement, $787 million. But, hopefully they're able to pursue that, or I mean, even is there any criminal action that can be taken, extradition for bringing people from across the world over here for paying for that, or anything? I mean, is it just this is a company, there's no individuals that you can put any of the blame on, there's no one that you can say like, oh, your company did this, so you're responsible, even if they obviously don't have 787, but hey, bankrupting them in Vietnam, that's something.
Well, without knowing the details, and of course we have no details because they didn't appear and defend themselves, so there was no discovery, no getting into the documents to see what people knew about. I mean, if there was some crazy thing where they were like, ooh, let's design this so we can kill kids. I'm just saying, I mean, there was crazy. Well,
that would be what needed to happen in order for something like this. It would have to be
something extreme. Maybe not quite that extreme, but again, we don't know any of that information because they didn't ever even show up. Yeah. And so they didn't provide any information, any discovery, any of their internal documents, emails, designs, any of that stuff. That was just, and so of course the jury could assume the worst there. They didn't defend themselves with it, and they also didn't hang themselves with it.
And how often does that happen where there's something that happens, some defect, product issue, with a manufacturer from across the world, different country, international, whatever it is, how often does that happen? And I feel like it's very hard to hold accountability.
It is. Yeah, I had a case. Well, and there are certain circumstances where basically you do your research and it's like, we're never going to collect anything from this manufacturer. Yeah. And so then you perhaps do try to go after the seller.
Yeah.
And there are theories against the seller on certain things. And perhaps the seller, should have examined the product, any product that they were selling and promoting more carefully to ensure that they ensured that it was, compliant with the United States safety standards. So there have been cases where I've looked at them and we're like, okay, we're not going to get this company wherever it is, Taiwan, a lot of stuff in Taiwan and China. Mm-hmm. And so is there another defendant where we actually can collect from?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a common problem. And so many of our products are made overseas these days. That's one of the reasons that people are always ranting about Buy American. Well, this is another good reason, because if you have to sue them, you can find them.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where the question comes from is, China. China is a big manufacturer these days. They're doing like 60% of the world export, some insane percentage like that. And I mean, I would imagine with that many manufacturers there, the amount of issues that come up, it's so hard to pursue them. It's so hard to do anything if anything happens.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why the Hague Convention actually provides, here's what you need to do in order to serve an overseas defendant. But even if you serve them, they just ignore you. Then there isn't anything for what you can do.
It's like someone's knocking on your door and you look through the curtain. Oh, sorry, no one's home.
Yeah, so.
That's terrible.
That's a bad one.
Well, hopefully, I mean, I doubt there's going to be any updates on that one going in the future. I mean, maybe there's some type of response from the company, but it's not.
Or maybe just information about what they were able to do as far as tracking them down and any efforts to that end.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be a lot more interested in tracking them down with a actual judgment in hand as opposed to just getting them to respond and defend themselves.
Yeah.
But I'll be curious, so I'll keep an eye on that.
Interesting. So what else has been going on in the news?
Well, I'll tell you what's always in the news is the Ozempic and Wegovy drama.
Wegovy.
Okay, well, Ozempic, of course, the Ozempic,
Yeah.
right? For type 2 diabetes that has this great side effect of losing weight. So
Miracle weight loss drug.
Yes, the celebrity weight loss. And Wegovy is made by the same manufacturer, but that's the one that's actually intended for weight loss.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I just think the whole thing is interesting, so I kind of follow up on it. And what's in the news this week about it is that Novo Nordisk, which is the manufacturer of both of these products, is really pushing hard to get to overturn the law against. So actually, it's a regulation. So Medicare will not pay for weight loss drugs.
Yeah.
Okay. And this happened ways back when the FinFin thing, was going crazy. Anyway, Medicare will not cover it. So people can only buy it if they're on Medicare. They can only buy it if it's out of pocket. And so they're really pushing and they're supporting various groups, minority groups actually is the kind of the interest of this, to giving them money to help them push to get those restrictions lifted so that Medicare will pay for it. Mm-hmm. Medicare only pays only people who are over 65 are eligible for Medicare. However, if Medicare pays for something, then a lot of times the private insurers will start covering it. So this is big bucks for them. If they can get this to be covered by insurance, and including Medicare, their clientele will just skyrocket.
Yeah.
I mean, because people want to do this, but at $1,200 a month, they can't pay out of pocket for it. And so that's why it's the celebrity drug right now. Only the celebrities, very well-to-do people are able to afford it. And so they've actually been pitching some groups, specifically some influential Black Americans, because they are saying that it's a particular issue for Black people because apparently obesity is at about 50% in the Black community, which is highest in the various racial communities.
What does that compare to other races?
I think that, in general, they say 30% of the overall population.
I mean, that's just both numbers are really high.
Yeah, I mean, in the overall population, about 30% of us
crazy.
are. And
then that's just in the States, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I know, America's known for just being the McDonald's burger country of the world.
Yeah. So they're really trying to pitch this, and so they're donating money to these various organizations, and it just feels really icky to me. I guess they've donated to Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, and the Hispanic Caucus.
Yeah, I get why you feel icky about it. I mean, it feels like they're just kind of hopping on this equality bandwagon to push their agenda.
Well, totally to push their agenda,
That's it.
And then, it just seems, it kind of goes back to the whole J&J talc thing where, they were really pushing this to the Black community. I mean, that was the big, they really had pitched this, to the minority communities, and were just killing them off. I mean, it was horrible trying to convince them that they particularly needed this.
Yeah.
And it just feels kind of like that again. And it's all about big dollars. I mean, if you can get this stuff to be covered by insurance, I mean, we're talking maybe trillions, right? We're going to get into those numbers.
Well, and it feels like something, you see it a lot with marketing and with a lot of big brands where, whenever there's a lot of these racial issues that come up, they use it as an opportunity. And most recently, kind of with LGBTQ, transgender, they use it as an opportunity to push their product. And obviously, I think it's great standing with them and equality, 100%. But I think the way that it's done a lot of the time, especially in marketing, is distasteful. And then the way that it's being done here is just straight up manipulative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And one of the big advertisements that come to mind is, I don't know if you remember the Kylie Jenner Pepsi one. There's a massive riots going out. I think it was around George Floyd when that was going on. And so there was a lot of protests going on, and there was a massive protest of all African Americans. And then on the other side, it was a bunch of police officers, and they're running at each other. And Kylie Jenner runs to the middle and holds up a Pepsi can, and everyone's like, and then just starts like celebrating and get along. It got insane blowback. It was like all over the news. But I mean, that's just one example. It's still been done.
Like Coke is the solution?
Yeah. Like, don't worry, guys. Yes, there's a lot of racial inequality going on in this country. A lot of people are getting it bad. Just have a Coke and you'll be good to go.
Man. Or just have some Ozempic or Wegovy and just...
Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting that idea is kind of being carried over here and like I said, in a very manipulative way.
Yeah, it just feels really icky. But I mean, I'm not surprised that they're trying to get it covered by insurance, but it just seems like a very manipulative way to do that by trying to go to certain groups and say, this is a particular problem in your community, and so you need to go. It's not us, it's you who's saying we need this drug. Let us have this drug, through Medicare and through our
We're
insurance.
Doing this for you guys. Sure, maybe we make a few trillion off it, but I promise this is for you.
But it's because we want to protect Black people.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So anyway, that's the latest ickiness about Ozempic and Wegovy. And that's, there's something in the news every week. We'll just see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested to see how that kind of plays out there and see if maybe that gets some attention on the news, because I think that's pretty crazy to me. We are coming close to the hour here, but I do want to touch on questions because I see we did get a pretty solid one.
We have a juicy question, yes. And so I just watched the Painkiller series. What happened to Richard Sackler? Did he go to jail?
And it's funny because I saw the Painkiller advertisement on Netflix, and they just straight up took this idea from, what was it?
Oh, gosh.
You recommended this. It was on Amazon Prime, I think.
Yeah, it was...
Medicated or...
Oh, shoot. Oh, my gosh, I saw it, and it was really good.
Well, for anyone that's unsure, Painkiller is about pretty much how hydrocodone... Dopesick, yeah.
Dopesick was the other series.
It's how all of these different opiates, painkillers, got onto the market, kind of the massive marketing push. A lot of the medical sales individuals going out there and kind of, rubbing shoulders with these doctors, grabbing their dry cleaning, ordering them flowers and being like, hey, by the way, you should buy these painkillers. They're non-addictive, being advertised as zero addiction. And the FDA gave it a special label that they really pushed. And then that kind of led to this massive opiate addiction that our country is still facing.
Well, that we're still suffering from. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Actually, Peter and I just watched this last week also. Very well done. Matthew Broderick plays Richard Sackler, and that's Sarah Jessica Parker from Sex and the City, her husband. That's how I know him. But he's actually a great actor in his own right. But it was very good. But this one focused a lot on him specifically and the Sackler family, a little bit more so than the Dopesick one did.
Yeah.
But similar, showing just how these ordinary Americans who, one of the storylines was this man who owned a tire shop and he was injured on the job, had a back injury. very upstanding family man, and then starts taking this medication, becomes addicted. And of course, the doctors are saying it's not
Impossible.
addictive,
Yeah.
but they're upping it. And then, ultimately he does become addicted. It just destroys his family and ultimately,
Yeah.
spoiler alert, but ultimately kills him. And so that happened to many, many people. But this one really focused more on kind of what was happening within Purdue Pharma and Sacklers. And it wasn't really clear at the end what had happened to him. But he's 78 now, apparently. Wow. And so what happened was ultimately the deal was that there was a $6 billion payout from the Sacklers. And and that was to protect them from any future lawsuits. So, and $3 billion of that came from the family's personal fortune, as opposed to,
Being able to just dish out $3 billion and still go to the grocery store the next day.
Yeah. So a total of $6 billion, and at least $750 million is allocated to go to the victims of the victims and their families.
$750 million.
Yeah, which is not very.
That's nothing for the opioid addiction. Like this addiction's been going on for I don't know how long now, decades, and I mean hundreds of thousands of individuals and especially families being affected.
Yeah.
750 million is doesn't go very far.
No, and it almost kind of feels a little bit like the Johnson & Johnson stuff, because even after they paid $3 billion out of their personal holdings, they still are worth somewhere around $11 billion. Yeah. And so because of the way that this was worked out, basically the company was at fault, but they were protected. And so nobody's going to jail. They're not criminally charged. And he is living happily in Boca Raton, Florida. Apparently slightly downsized his house, but so that's the situation. But even and some recent things have happened too.
Now that there's 2 shows about him, I'm sure some more stuff's coming up.
Well, no. So when this all happened, Purdue Pharma filed for bankruptcy, and so all of the individual cases. This was back in 2019. All of those individual cases then became bankruptcy claims, which we'd kind of talked about earlier. So there wouldn't be lawsuits, but they would actually be compensated through the trustee. Well, there have been issues with this bankruptcy plan getting approved, and it has been appealed twice, and it just recently on August 10th got appealed to the Supreme Court. So what that means is that this bankruptcy pot of money is not, we don't know when they're going to start making payments out of that.
So it still hasn't even started making of the 750.
No, it hasn't even started. But the issue is, and so this kind of goes to that also, is that the issue is that the bankruptcy trustee has appealed it on the basis that nothing happened to this. Well, and one of the issues is that nothing happened to the Sacklers, and that maybe there should be more money.
Yeah.
So perhaps by it getting appealed, ultimately there will be more in this pot. Perhaps not. It may still get approved and move forward. But as far as anybody getting paid, they were thinking it might be quicker because it was in bankruptcy back in 2019. And we have no idea when people will start getting payouts at this point.
So nothing has really happened to the Sackler family other than being fined some money and having $3 billion come out of their purse change, which is a lot of money, but they still got 11 sitting on the sidelines.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then, of course, they don't look too good. And then one of the issues is that they had their names all over universities and art galleries, and lots of places are pulling their name off because they don't want to be associated. They donated all kinds of money, and so the Sackler name is coming off of a lot of things. Well, but ultimately, he's, he was really the whole kingpin of this thing. Yeah. And, he's... disgraced, yes. Hated, yes. But
it's good. Like shows like this, I think, are always really good too, because it brings more attention to these issues and to these individuals that I think kind of fall off in the background, and sometimes it results in more active stuff happening. Like I know with the big show that blew up a few years back, How to Make a Murderer with Stephen Avery, where essentially it was an entire Netflix documentary about how he was wrongly accused and incriminated, and then there's just a lot of like sus stuff about the case overall. When that Netflix documentary blew up, then a lot of lawyers came and offered to do a pro bono, and and the case opened back up, and a lot of additional work got done on that case specifically because of the spotlight that show brought to it. And so I'm hoping something like that happens now, especially with a Netflix episode or series on it, as well as the Dope Sick one.
Right. Well, and I think it's always helpful to me too when these come out, because when I talk to people about what I do and some of the cases that I've handled over the years, people are always like, and sometimes they're just very skeptical, and they're like, oh, a drug company wouldn't do that, and they're in the business to save people, and blah blah blah. And then some of the stories that I would tell them about where these studies were lost or changed or deleted, and lying to the FDA, and these documents where they admit that they know people are dying and they don't care, and they're like, oh, they're very skeptical. And then something like this comes out, and they're like, wow, this really does happen. Yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, it happens more than people realize. So I think just the fact that it's out there in the public domain is important, and so people can be a little bit more skeptical. That's always it's always safer.
Be aware and ask those.
Be aware.
Questions.
Don't be so trusting. And
Well, that's a great question. We are coming to a close here. If anyone does have any other questions, feel free to comment wherever you're watching this: Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. I don't think you can comment on iTunes Podcast or Spotify, but definitely throw us a follow and ask questions. And if it's something that you don't really want to post on social media, you can always email us at podcast@showeredlaw.com, and we'll get to your questions. We love answering questions, and
we do.
It's definitely a lot of different perspectives that we haven't thought of, and we get to kind of deep dive into it a little bit more as well. Is there any kind of I don't know what the word is, sneak peeks? Oh,
yeah. So our topic next week, as far as cases that we're handling, will be involving the Gardasil vaccine. And that is the vaccine for HPV, or human papillomavirus, which is like the venereal warts. So we will be talking about that vaccine and give you some information so that you can decide whether or not you want your daughters to be getting it.
Well, that should be an interesting topic. Overall, I think the show went pretty well. A lot of solid information we got out there. Good question. And just a lot of, I think, kind of shocking stuff. I always think it's really interesting when we have shows where we go into some big numbers, some big problems, and some just big stuff overall.
Yeah. Well, we'll bring more big stuff next week.
Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week, Wednesday as well. And we hope all of you have a fantastic week and weekend, and have a good one. Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.